Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Pesachim Daf Yud Test continues a discussion of the halachos of Tumah and Tahara. We have pretty much three separate things happening here. First of all, we're comparing halachos and statements of Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Akiva, who was Rabbi Yossi's Rebbe, and the Gemara wants to know if these two fit together or if they have to disagree. Tangentially to that, we'll discuss the halacha of tziruf kli as far as tumah is concerned. If you have multiple pieces of food in one kli and one becomes tamei, does that automatically mean all the other ones are tamei? Is that a halacha derabanan or deraisa? Then the Gemara will bring another mishnah from Maseches Eidios, which is another statement of Rabbi Chanina Sagana Kahanim. The Gemara will analyze that mishnah and a number of halachas we can learn out of that. So first of all, we're comparing halacha of Rabbi Akiva and a limud of Rabbi Yossi, and the Gemara has said that they don't fit together, and the Gemara here is explaining why. What are the two statements? So by way of introduction, please review the introduction we had to the sugyas of Tumah and Tahara, the introduction to Daf Yud Dalid. But briefly to repeat it here, there are three levels of foods that are different from each other in their susceptibility to Tumah that we have discussed. The higher level kedusha something has, the more susceptible to Tumah there is. There's chulin, which is which has no kedusha, that has the least susceptibility to Tumah. That can become a sheni, according to most opinions. That can become a second level Tumah. It can become Tameh from something which was a Rishon, which means that it got Tameh from the source. So Chulin can go as far as a Sheni, cannot be any lower level Tumah than that. Truma can go one level below that, it can be a Shlishi. And Kachim, which is Karbanos, can go one level below Truma and even be a Revi. That's what most people hold. Rabbi Akiva says that Chulin can actually be a Shlishi. That's what we've seen in the Daf Yud Ches. He learns from the pasuk of Yitma that chulin food could actually be a shlishi, one level below what everybody else seems to hold. Now that's Rabbi Akiva's statement. What's Rabbi Yossi? Rabbi Yossi says that each one being a level lower than the other is a constant relationship. It's because each one is learned from the other. Chulin is a sheni. Chulin, whatever it is, Truma is going to be one level below that. We learned that from a kavachomer tuvin that Truma can go one level more chomer. It can actually have Tumah that is one level below that. It can be a Shlishi. Now, Kodesh can go one level below that, and therefore that could be a Revi. So again, Rabbi Akiva's halacha is that Chulin can even be a Shlishi. Rabbi Yossi's halacha is that whatever Truma is, it's one level lower. Whatever Kodesh is, it's one level lower than Teruma. Now the question is, do these things fit together? The Gemara is going to say, well, definitely Rabbi Yossi cannot hold of Rabbi Akiva, because if he did, he wouldn't say that Truma is a Shlishi and Kodesh is a Revi. Hare, Rabbi Akiva says that Chulin could be a Shlishi. If Chulin could be a Shlishi, Truma has to be one level below that, then Truma should be a Revi, not a Shlishi. And Kodesh has to be one level under that, it should be able to be a Chamishi, not just a Revi. Therefore, Rabbi Yossi definitely doesn't fit with Rabbi Akiva. The question is, we don't know what Rabbi Akiva holds about Truma and Kodesh. You know that he holds that Chulin is a Shlishi. We don't know, maybe he really does say that Truma is a Revi, can become a Revi, and Kachim is one level below that, and can become a Chamishi. Maybe he really does hold of Rabbi Yossi's source that each of these has to be one step below the other. So the Gemara will reject this. But before we do that, let's explore Rabbi Yossi's halacha. Where does he derive this from? The Truma has to be one level below Chulin, and that Kodesh has to be one level below Shlishi. So the Gemara says he makes the kavachomer because there's actually something between Sheni and Shlishi, and there's something between Shlishi and Revi. Between Sheni and Shlishi is the concept of a Tful Yom. Tful Yom has less powerful Tumah than a Sheni, but more powerful than a Shlishi. Therefore, let's look at the Tful Yom. He is not Metamei Chulin, but he can't eat Teruma. That means that Teruma is stricter than Chulin in the world of a Tful Yom. He's not Metamei Chulin, but he is Metamei Teruma. That means Teruma is stricter than Chulin. Says Rabbi Yossi, if Teruma is stricter than Chulin, and Chulin can be a Sheni, then Teruma has to be a Shlishi. Now the same logical step can be made between Teruma and Kachim using a Mechosar Kippurim. Mechosar Kippurim is somebody who needs to bring a korban to complete his tahara process. After he's already gone to the mikveh, after the sun has already come down, he needs one additional step. He needs a korban. His level of Tuma is between a Shlishi and a Revi. Somebody who's in Mechusar Kippurim is allowed to eat Truma, because he's one level below Shlishi. Truma's lowest level of Tuma is a Shlishi. But he cannot eat carbon meat because that is problematic for him. That goes all the way to Revi, and he's between Shlishi and Revi. Now, in the world of Mechusar Kippurim, therefore, you see clearly that Karbanos are stricter than Truma. Mechusar Kippurim is allowed to eat Truma, but he's not allowed to eat Karbanos. Therefore, Karbanos are one level stricter than Truma, and if Truma can become a Shlishi, then Kachim can actually become a Revi. That's what we see source. The only problem here is that we have the halacha that when we have a Kal V'chomer, it's limited to the halachos that it's being learned from. Each new concept is limited to what's before, and therefore, if you're going to show me that Truma is stricter than Chulin, it should just show that it's at least as the same, but you can't show me that it's actually worse. You can't show me that it could be a Shlishi. You could just show me that it could be a Sheni. And if Kachim is worse than Truma, it should just show me that it's at least as bad as Truma, that it has to be Shlishi. But you can't show me that it could be worse and it could be Revi. So the answer to that is that concept doesn't apply here, because we have a halacha that concept is not used when the Kal V'chomer would otherwise be useless. And in this case, the Kal V'chomer would be useless. What's the source that Truma can be a Sheni and that Karbonos can be a Shlishi? I already have psukim for that. Rashi brings the source for Truma being a Sheni. For Karbonos being a Shlishi, I have a pasuk for that. It says, "V'abasar sheyiga b'chol tamei lo ya'achal," meat of Karbonos which touches anything tamei. Tamei is a term which applies only to Sheni as far as kachim are concerned. So any meat which touches that becomes tamei. So you see that meat can therefore can become tamei from a sheni, therefore the meat will become a shlishi. I don't need a pasuk to tell me that. The Kal V'chomer has to be telling me a step further than that. It can't be saying that it's shlishi because that truma and kachim are at least as bad, that kachim is at least as bad as truma and it can be a shlishi, because I already know that kachim can be a shlishi from the psukim. And therefore the Kal V'chomer has to be telling me one step further that it can be a revi. It's actually worse, not just as bad. Rashi has a source that Truma can become a Sheni. Therefore, the Kal V'chomer that says the Truma is at least as bad, the Truma is worse, and therefore it has to be at least as bad as Chulin, also can't be teaching me that Truma can be a Sheni. It has to be saying one level further that Truma is a Shlishi. Okay, so that's Rabbi Yossi's source, and we know that Rabbi Yossi can't fit with Rabbi Akiva. The question is, can Rabbi Akiva fit with Rabbi Yossi? Does Rabbi Akiva hold that Truma could really become a Revi and Kachim can be a Chamishi? So the Gemara says, no, he does not. If he held that way, we would have one Mishnah or Brisa somewhere that would say such an opinion, and then we would know that that was Rabbi Akiva's opinion. You will not find, no matter how far you look, any Mishnah or Brisa that says that Truma can become a Revi and Kachim can become a Chamishi. So the Gemara is not impressed with this argument. The Gemara says, based on that, you're going to pass on halacha because you haven't found the Mishnah, you haven't found the Brisa. That's not a proof. That's not a source for it. So the Gemara says, okay, I have an actual source where I have a Mishnah which is attributable to Rabbi Akiva that does say that Truma can only be a Shlishi and not further, and Kachim can only be a Revi. The Mishnah has two halachos. One of them has to be Rabbi Akiva, and the other one is this one that we are discussing. So the first halacha in this Mishnah is the halacha of tziruf. If you have a large kli that has multiple pieces of food in it, and one of them becomes tamei, all the other food there becomes tamei as well, because they are considered to be the same unit of food, because they're all combined in one kli. It's not that tum is transferred from the food to the kli. Food cannot make the kli tamei. The kli could make the food tamei, but it can't go the other way. So therefore, if you have multiple pieces of food in one kli that are not touching each other, they cannot transfer tumma from one to the other. The only way that if one becomes tamei, the other is this concept of tziruf, that multiple pieces of food in one kli become tamei together. That's the first halacha in this Mishnah. The second halacha is what we're looking for. Truma can be a shlishi, and kachim can be a revi. Now, the Gemara says, we've commented on this, that this Mishnah has to be Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva is the one who holds of the halacha of tziruf, that multiple items of food in the same kli become tamei automatically. If you're matami one, the other becomes tamei as well. Where did Rabbi Akiva say that? He says that so is to find flour that's used in the base hamikdash, the ketores, the smelling spices, lavona, another spice that's on the lechem ha panim, and gecholim, the coals for the ketores, all these things. If a tul yom, somebody who needs to go to the mikvah, to touch it, who went to the mikvah and needs the sun to come down, if the if he touches one of them, then all the other ones that are in the same kli contract him as well. So therefore, the first halacha of this Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva. The second halacha must therefore also be Rabbi Akiva, and the second halacha clearly shows that Rabbi Akiva holds that Truma can be a Shlishi and not a Revi, and Chulin can be a Revi and not a Chamishi. That concludes the Gemara's discussion of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yasi. The Gemara now just has an observation based on this Mishnah here, this halacha of Tziruf, that if you have multiple items in the same kli, and you're metame one, they all become tamei automatically. We see from here that is a halacha dirabanan, because the tumah of these objects, solas, ketoras, levana, and gecholim, all these things don't have tumah deraisa. Deraisa, they're not makabel tumah. Midirabanan, we consider them susceptible to tumah because of their high level kedusha. They're used in the Beis Hamikdash. So you see here that this Mishnah, which is Rabbi Akiva, we've said, holds that the Tumah, the concept of Tziruf, is a rabbinical concept, because we're applying it in Tumah D'Rabbanan. The Gemara says that argues on Rav Chanin. Rav Chanin says the concept of Tziruf is actually a D'Oraisa halacha. It's learned out of the pasuk Kaf Achas Zahav Malaya Ketaris, one ladle of gold filled with Ketores. Uses the word achas, which is extra, kaf achas, to describe that everything in there is like one. Whatever tum applies to one applies to the other automatically. Okay, now the Gemara brings in the next sugya, which is a new Mishnah, quoted from Maseches Edios, which is another halacha brought by Hanani Sagana Kahanim, and he talks about when a cow was shechted and a needle was found in the cow. The assumption is that the needle is tamei. The Gemara will explain why. And the question is, what was the needle mitame? So the Mishnah here says, it depends where you found the needle. If it's found in the flesh of the cow, then the flesh is tamei. The knife they used to shecht it, and the hands of the kahanim who shecht it, stay tahar, but the flesh is tamei. If, however, it was found in the material inside the stomach of the cow, it was found in the food, the digested food somewhere in the intestines of the cow, in that case everything is tahar, the meat is tahar as well. Now the Gemara has a few things to analyze about this Mishnah. First of all, the Gemara discusses why is it that when the needle is found in the flesh of the animal, the hands of the kohanim who shechted and the knife that he used to shecht, why are they not tamei? Why do they not become tamei here? Now, the tumah of hands and the tumah of the knife should both be dirabanan. Hands cannot be tamei separately from the body midaraisa. Only if the person becomes tamei can his hands become tamei. The Rabbanan created a concept of tumah on the hands, that the hands are tamei and need to be washed in netilas yadayim. There are a number of reasons they did that, usually to protect the truma from being spoiled or soiled by unclean hands. Now, that's one thing. The other thing is, the knife can't become tamei from a needle. You can't transfer tumah from a kli to a kli. The only way to do that is if you have liquid. The Rabbanan made a gzeira that liquids that touch a tamei kli become a rishon l'tumah, and those liquids can then transfer tumah even further. That's two rabbinical decrees about liquids, that they can transfer tumah from kli to kli. Now, both of those should apply over here and should be metame, both the hands and the knife. So says Rabbi Akiva, the hands don't become tamei, obviously because the gzeira derabanan of tamei on hands doesn't apply in the Beis Hamikdash. So the Gemara asks, well, what about the knife? Why don't you tell me that also obviously doesn't apply? That gzeira derabanan of liquids being metame the kli also doesn't apply in the Beis Hamikdash. Says the Gemara, this has nothing to do with that decree not applying. That decree was not made yet in the days of Rabbi Chanina. Sagana Kahanim was the one who said over this Mishnah. The decree of tumah on hands was made in the times of Shlomo HaMelech. The decree in the times of tumah on a kli to kli via water, liquids, that was made 1,000 years later. So it did not exist yet. That's why the hands are. That's why the knife is tahar. Nothing to do with the fact that the decrees don't apply in the Beis Hamikdash. Now the Gemara rejects this. The Gemara says, actually it's not true. The timing on both was the same. They were both made as one of the 18 gzeiras that Beis Shammai made when they visited the attic of Reb Chanina ben Gurion. So the Gemara therefore has to give a different reason that the knife is not a tameh here. It can't be that the Gzeira wasn't made yet, and Rabbi Akiva didn't seem to want to say that it was because the Gzeira doesn't apply in the Beis HaMikdash. The Gemara says it's because we're talking about where there was no liquid here. This animal wasn't wet; it was perfectly dry. Therefore, there was no liquid that could transfer the tumah from the needle to the knife. Okay, next the Gemara wants to know, why was this needle tameh in the first place? We're assuming that it was a tameh needle. Why was it tameh? How do we have this halacha of a tameh needle? So the Gemara tries two options. The Gemara first of all says, well, maybe we're talking about a needle which we just don't know where it came from. We don't know what it's doing here, and we have to assume that any random thing you find is tameh. So Gemara says that's not true in Yerushalayim. Outside Yerushalayim, you do have to assume random things are tameh because there are tameh people running around all over the place. However, in Yerushalayim, most things are tar. We have a statement of two Amiram, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina, who say that if you find spittle, you find saliva spit on the floor in Yerushalayim, it might be spit by a zav, in which case it will be tameh, but you could assume that there aren't too many zavim in Yerushalayim. And if you find the kli, the other one says you could assume that it's tahar, there aren't too many tameh people running around Yerushalayim. So this animal which was slaughtered in the Beis HaMikdash, why would I assume that the needle that was in it was tameh? The Gemara therefore says, well, it could be that it's referring to where the animal was muzzled and couldn't have swallowed the needle in Yerushalayim. It was muzzled since it entered Yerushalayim was muzzled. Obviously the needle was swallowed outside Yerushalayim, and wherever it picked the needle up from, it was in an area where the needle is safek tameh. That's one approach. The Gemara's other approach is that we're referring to where somebody lost the needle that he knew was tameh mace. The needle had touched or been in a room with the dead. And then, when this needle was found, he said, oh, that's my needle. He recognized it, and now he knew that that's his needle for sure. Therefore, we know that it's a tameh mace needle. Now, skipping here a bit, the Gemara asks, if it's a needle of a tameh mace, then it should be metameh, the person, the hands, and the kli, the knife, that slaughtered this cow, because a needle which touched the tameh mace has the halacha of an av hatoma. Av hatoma can pass toma to a kli and to a person. Should be metame the whole person and the knife. So Gemara says this must teach me the halacha of safek tumah b'rishos hayachid. We know that if you have a situation where you're not sure if you became tameh because you touched something, you don't know if you touched something tameh or not. So the halacha there is that it depends what zone you are. If you're in Rishos HaRabim, we say that it's a safek tahar. If you say that it's in Rishos HaYachid, then it's a safek tameh. It's learned out of Gzeir Sakasif by Sota. So Gemara says, obviously then, this is a case where it was Rishos HaRabim and it's safek tahar. We don't know if you actually touched the needle. So says the Gemara, but we know where he shechted him. He shechted him in the Azara, the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash. So obviously this is teaching me that the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash has the halacha of a Rishos HaRabim, and that's why it's safek tahar. Says the Gemara, not so fast. There's another concept as far as the safek tumah, and that's if the question of tahar or tameh is on an object which cannot ask. It's just an object, then we say sveiko tahar no matter where it is, even if it's in Rishos HaYachid. So maybe really the Azar is a Rishos HaYachid. The reason why the knife is tahar is because it's sveiko tahar, because it cannot ask the question. The Gemara says, no, the concept of something which cannot ask doesn't apply here, because the person's holding it. When you say that something which cannot ask, when the safek tumah on something which cannot ask is an automatic safek tahar, that's only in a situation where there's no person that's wielding the object. Here, the Kohen is holding the knife, he's wielding it. Even if he later puts it down, still it's wielded by the Kohen, and therefore there is a safek tahar automatically, nothing to do with Rishos HaRabim and Rishos HaYachid. Now, what we skipped earlier was the Gemara has a comment on this rule that we said, that a safek object in Yerushalayim is automatically considered to be tahar. It was Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Chanina. One had said that saliva in the streets of Yerushalayim is tahar, and one had said that a kli found in the streets of Yerushalayim is tahar. The Gemara says both of these statements can actually be learned out of a Mishnah, and therefore the Amarim saying them are superfluous. Where do you see them in a Mishnah? So about the spit that you find on the street, there's a Mishnah that says straight out, any spit which you find on the street of Yerushalayim is soon to be tahar, except for what's called the upper market. That's where Zavim used to hang out in Yerushalayim, the upper market. So the Gemara says, okay, so what the Amara here was adding was that even if you know in a specific incident or you're aware that a Zav walked down this street, So you know that the saliva which is found there could have come from him. Still, you could assume that it's not from him. That's his extra chiddush. As far as the other statement, that a kli which is found in Yerushalayim could be automatically assumed to be tahar. So says this is also seen from a Mishnah. The Mishnah says any kli which you find in Yerushalayim. So if you find it on the road, on the steps that go down to the mikvah, you have to assume that it's tamei, right? Because the people who are going down to the mikvah are tamei people, so they probably dropped this kli and it's from them, and therefore it's tamei. That implies that anywhere else in Yerushalayim you can assume that it's tahar. So why do I need this Amira to tell me that any kli found in Yerushalayim is tahar? The Gemara says, well, not so fast. The same Mishnah you're quoting that says that a kli which is found on the steps down to the mikvah is tamei says that if it's found on the steps coming out of the mikvah, it's tahar. So that would imply that anywhere else in the city, it's tamei. Only people coming out of the mikvah are automatically assumed to be tahar. Anywhere else in Yerushalayim, people are tamei there, and the kli should be tamei. So you don't have a proof from this Mishnah either way. Therefore, you have the Amayra who comes and he tells me which of these is dafko. Which of these are you meant to assume is only here, but everywhere else is different. You're meant to assume that on the first statement, that if somebody goes down to the steps of Yerushalayim, that a kli found on the steps on the way down into the mikveh, that's tamei. Anywhere else in Yerushalayim is tahar. That's what he's coming to teach me, that's the one which is specific. The other statement, that anything which comes out, anything found on the steps out of the mikveh is tamei, that's non-specific. Anything found on the steps that are on the way out of the mikveh is tahar. That's non-specific. Really, all the other streets are tahar also. The reason why he said coming out of the mikveh is to exclude the road which leads to the mikveh where both tahar and tamei people walk on. Those that are both tahar and tamei, they both travel on that alley, that's excluded. That alley, if you find the kli there, is actually considered to be tamei. That's why we say only on the way down itself is it tahar, to exclude that alley. Because on that alley is a lot of tamei people walking, because it's a road that feeds to the mikveh. But anywhere else besides for that alley would be tahar, even if it's not necessarily the steps down. That's what the Amayra is coming to.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.